All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back.
Hello.
So today we are going on a deep dive into something that, you might not think is super fascinating at first glance.
Okay.
But we're talking about household chores
All right.
and how they break down, like, who does what and why,
Interesting.
and how all of that is evolved over time. And we're going to be looking at some excerpts today from the Concise Encyclopedia of Sociology.
Great.
And it should be pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah, sounds good.
Have you ever thought about, like, why certain chores seem to just automatically fall along gender lines?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Like, why are the men in the house always the ones, like, taking out the trash or, like, mowing the lawn or whatever it is, and then the women are doing a lot of the, like, cooking and cleaning?
It's really interesting. And there are historical reasons for that we'll dive into, going back to the Industrial Revolution, which kind of changed everything.
Yeah, so, like, before industrialization, like, way back when, it's like 1700s even, households were very different back then, right? Like, they were their own little self-sufficient economic units.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. They were producing things. The whole family would be involved, any servants or apprentices.
Right.
Everybody was contributing to keeping that household running, and it was an economic unit.
Like, everybody was pitching in to just, like, survive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very different than today.
Yeah. And it's crazy to think that, like, the term housewife didn't even appear in England until 1871.
That's a great point. That shows you how much things changed, right?
Right. Yeah. Like, the language itself reflects, like, this massive shift
Yeah.
in how society was structured.
Totally.
So then, like, industrialization happens, and what happens?
Well, so as work starts moving out of the home and into factories, right, we get this separation between what we call the domestic sphere and the public sphere.
Okay.
And with that physical separation, we see these gender roles start to emerge very distinctly.
So, like, men are going to the factory and women are staying home.
That's right. The men become associated with the public sphere. They're the breadwinners. They're going out to make money.
Okay.
And the women are kind of relegated to the private sphere of the home. They're the homemakers.
Okay.
And this is where things start to get interesting, because it wasn't just a practical division of labor.
Yeah, it sounds like there was a whole ideology built up around it.
Exactly. It became about not just who could do the work, but who should do the work.
Right.
So men were seen as strong, rational, built for this competitive world of business.
Right.
And women, on the other hand, were viewed as pure nurturing, best suited for, managing the home and raising children.
So it's like they had to justify this economic shift that had already happened.
Totally. It legitimized it in a way.
Okay, so then you have middle and upper class women who no longer needed to, like, directly contribute to the family income. So then they were just focused on, like, managing the household and raising the children.
Right. And, prior to this shift, women's work at home, like spinning or weaving, was considered productive. It contributed to the family's well-being.
Right. Like a valuable economic contribution.
Exactly. But when that productive work moved out of the home, women's contributions were viewed very differently, and I think that's had a lasting impact.
Yeah, because, like, even today, we still have all those stereotypes.
Absolutely, about women being naturally responsible for, housework and childcare, even though that's not really the case.
Right, yeah. So let's, like, fast forward to today.
Okay.
So we know that women still do most of the housework.
Unfortunately.
But the encyclopedia talks about this interesting distinction between routine tasks like cooking and cleaning.
Right.
And occasional tasks like repairs, like fixing things. Like, what's the significance of that distinction?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting, because men are often more involved in those occasional tasks, things that aren't as time sensitive or frequent. So, like, think about your own household. Does this resonate with you? Like, have you noticed who usually handles the less frequent but often, like, more physically demanding tasks?
Oh, yeah, totally. I can definitely see that pattern, like, in my own life, for sure.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, like, all these historical trends, they're still playing out, like, every day.
Absolutely. They're ingrained in our society.
But it's like, even with more women working outside the home now, that gap in housework hasn't really closed, has it?
Sadly, no. It's a global trend. We see women's participation in paid work increasing worldwide, but the division of household labor hasn't kept pace.
Wow.
Yeah, it really highlights how deeply ingrained these norms are.
Yeah, but I mean, are there, like, any exceptions to this at all?
There are some interesting exceptions. In some formerly Soviet countries, for example, husbands are more likely to share housework more equally.
Really?
Yeah, which is really interesting. It makes you wonder what factors contributed to that more equitable division of labor in those contexts.
Yeah, so, like, what's the big takeaway here? Like, what does all this mean for us today?
Well, I think the main takeaway is that the division of household labor has deep historical roots going all the way back to the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
And those gender roles and expectations that emerged back then, they're still with us today.
They still impact us.
They influence how we think about work in our homes and how we divide it up.
Yeah, it's kind of unsettling to think about how something that happened so long ago is still having like such a huge impact on our lives.
Amazing, right?
Yeah, so it's like if we know that these patterns are based on like these outdated social norms, then how do we like challenge them?
That's the question.
How do we create a more equitable division of labor, not just in our own homes, but like on a larger societal level? Like, is that even possible?
That's something to think about for sure.
Yeah, a lot to think about.
Lots to unpack there.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for having me.